The first laws recognizing same-sex marriage were enacted during the first decade of the 21st century, and polls ever since point to increasing support for it. One recent survey had 53% of Americans supporting same-sex marriage, up from just 40% in 2007. Are we witnessing a changing of the heterosexual guard? Let's ask and welcome back Andrew Solomon, author of Far From the Tree, and it's great to have you in that chair and back in our studio again.
It's great to be here again. Thank you.
I've told you this before, but it bears repeating. When you came on and did the whole program on your book during your book tour several months ago, we have never had more feedback to any program we have done in 7 years of doing this program than your interview on that program. You got something going, no question about it.
Thank you, thank you.
Let's talk, I want to set the table with this. The rise in support for same-sex marriage over the past decade, according to the Pew Research Center, is among the largest changes in opinion on any policy over this time period. 14% of all Americans and 28% of gay marriage supporters say they have changed their minds on the issue in favor of gay marriage. Now, I have talked to corporate executives in the past who say they spend millions of dollars to move the needle of public opinion 2 points on a product that they're selling. This change has been explosive, and I wonder if you can help us sort of understand why you think it's happening.
I think the whole idea of gay marriage was incredibly novel 20 years ago. I knew someone who was a champion of gay marriage, and I thought, marriage? We have all kinds of other things to deal with, not marriage. And somehow it's captured the public imagination. And I think in some way it blends a radicalism, because after all, marriage is being extended to people who never had any access to it before, and a kind of conservatism, because it represents the decision of gay people to tie themselves into this institution, to live lives in which they have families, are in settled permanent relationship. It gets away from some of how people used to perceive homosexuals. But there's also been an enormous amount of political capital expended on it by gay people, by supporters of gay people. There are many people who've said it's the civil rights issue of our time, and people want to be ahead of the curve on this.
Do you see it that way, the civil rights issue of our time?
Oh, I do, yes, absolutely. I'm on the board of the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, and the chairman of the board now, she was just a board member until recently, is someone who's straight, but who has said, when I grew up, I saw oppression against people of racial minorities. I still see some of it, but the worst prejudice that I've seen in my lifetime has been against gay people. And I was determined that if I wanted to make the world a better place, that was where I had to begin.
You know, I'm reminded of that character that Sam Waterston plays on Law and Order, Jack McCoy, the district attorney. When asked, do you favor gay marriage? He said, of course I do. Why shouldn't they be as miserable as the rest of us? There is some notion of, yeah, they're entitled to have things as bad as the rest of us who are in those kinds of marriages. Why should we deny them that? I mean, that's a part of it too, isn't it?
I think it is. But I think it's more and more a sense that gay people are not some strange, other, different thing. They're people, just like heterosexual people are people. If they want to sanctify their love, they should have as much right to do that as anyone else does. And there's no reason why people in gay relationships should go through different estate tax procedures and all of the other legalities that attach to marriage in the United States.
Do you think that's a generational thing? Because I have certainly discussed this issue with, let's say, gays and lesbians who are over the age of 60. And it is, for those that I have spoken with, not a big deal, I must say. You say it's the civil rights issue of our time? Sure wasn't for them.
Right.
Do you see that in your experience?
I see that the experience of gay people is so radically different now from what it used to be. I'm involved with the Gay and Lesbian Studies program at Yale, where I studied. The person who founded the program is Larry Kramer, leading gay activist, now in his 70s. When he talks about what it was like to be gay at Yale in the 1950s, I listen to him and I think, I can't imagine how anyone could have survived that. And I'm so grateful that I was gay at Yale in the 1980s. But then I look at the students who are there now, and I see the experience they're having as they imagine marriage and family and stability and wide acceptance by their families and by everyone else around them. And I'm deeply jealous of the experience they have. And my hope is that when they come back, when they're approaching 50, they'll have the same feeling of jealousy for the next generation.
So their experience today is clearly unlike yours 30 years ago because?
Because 30 years ago, I still felt that it was shameful to be gay. I still felt it would mean being socially marginalized. I still thought it meant that I would never get married, and I especially thought it meant that I would never have children. I felt as though I had to decide either insincerely to live with a woman and marry her and have a family, or sincerely to live with a man and to lose what I knew would be one of life's great experiences.
You actually thought that marrying a woman for show and having that life for show was an option for you?
I did feel it was an option for me. I had both boyfriends and girlfriends for many years. I think I could have made it work if I'd had to, but I don't think it would have been fair to the woman in question, and I'm glad I didn't have to go that route.
What role do you think, obviously more and more gay people today come out, and it's just not as big a deal, as you pointed out, as it once was. What role do you think coming out has played in changing the broader public's views on this issue?
So Harvey Milk famously said, when asked what someone should do by way of activism, the most important thing you can do is to tell someone. And I found that over and over again, as more and more gay people have come out, as more and more people have realized that they know gay people, as people have understood that there are gay people all around them doing all kinds of things, it's much harder to be intolerant of people whose stories you know. And when there are actually political campaigns going, one of the things that's been most effective has been people going door to door, knocking on the door and saying, I'm in favor of gay marriage, and I'm gay, and let me tell you my story. And a lot of the time, simply someone coming in, telling their story for 10 minutes to somebody, the person says, I never really thought of it that way. I always thought of it in the abstract. Meeting you, I've decided I'm on your side. I'm going to vote for you.
Would you extend that acceptance, though, to uncomfortable question? Let's just put it out there. Do you think heterosexuals are any more tolerant of gay sex, which at the end of the day is the thing that makes gays and straights different?
I think heterosexuals are less threatened by gay sex. I don't think that they think that because they're nice to gay people, they're going to become gay or they're going to be obliged to engage in sex acts that are antithetical to them. I think there's much less of a sense of it being terrifying and terrible and that it's going to somehow undermine the whole social fabric, and more a sense of, you like to do that, I like to do something else, you do your thing, I'll do my thing.
Again, culture helps here. So does a movie like Brokeback Mountain change people's views on that?
I think Brokeback Mountain was a really important moment. It's a beautiful movie, it's a lyrical movie, and even though it's a movie about two gay people, which is very much about their experience of oppression, their experience of not coming out, it also was really a tragic love story, and it was presented as a tragic love story. It wasn't agenda-driven, and it was precisely because it wasn't agenda-driven that it perhaps forwarded the agenda.
That, well, I'm trying to remember now. Jake Gyllenhaal and, say again? Oh, Heath Ledger, of course.
Heath Ledger, exactly.
Okay, two pretty macho, heterosexual-looking gay guys.
Right.
Right? So presumably that helped a bit too? They were kind of Hollywood good-looking? That doesn't hurt.
Hollywood good-looking never hurts. But I think there's been more and more a sense that there are some gay people who are very kind of gender atypical gay men who are very effeminate, lesbian women who are super butch, but there are also plenty of other people who are gay who don't look like that, who you don't spot as being gay across a room.
Let me, if you don't mind, Andrew, get a bit personal with you right now, because we've met you a few times in this studio, but I've never met your husband, I don't think. Has he come up here on the road with you when you're on your tours?
He hasn't come up to Canada with me. He's come on lots of bits of my tour, but we have a 4-year-old and he's at home taking care of our child.
He is, okay. Well, your husband's John. Tell me about John, and I guess the only way I would ask you to answer that is, I know you, is he at all like you?
I think he's a bit like me. He's the kindest person I know. He is extremely witty. I think we laugh an enormous amount. He worked as an editor, and he edits almost everything that I write, and does so beautifully. I wouldn't send anything to press without having him look it over. And I feel as though he's 11 years older than I am. He comes from a generation that expected marriage even less than mine did. And I think that for both of us, but especially for him, it's been a revelation that all of this is possible. And in having a family with him and seeing how incredibly attentive he is to our child and how deeply he loves our child and me, I've seen a depth in him that I think would not have emerged otherwise, and that's been the greatest joy of my life.
And you are, I'm guessing here, I don't know, are you ethnically Jewish?
I'm ethnically Jewish.
And
yes.
he is?
He has a Lutheran father and a Catholic mother and was brought up as a Catholic.
And did your parents faint when you said you weren't bringing home a Jewish boy?
No, I think my father had been more than broken in by then. So, as John says, in our household, we celebrate all holidays of feasting and celebration and none of repentance and sorrow. So that's
nice,
worked out well.
Did you marry John in the United States?
So I married John twice. The first time we had a civil partnership in England, because civil partnership, which is legally equivalent to marriage but doesn't have the word marriage attached to it, had become legal there. I'm a dual national, and there were various advantages to our getting married, but most of all, we wanted to declare our love in that public way. And then when gay marriage became legal in Connecticut, which is the state next to ours of New York, we decided to have a second wedding so that we could have the word marriage and use it fairly.
So your marriage is now officially sanctioned in the state of Connecticut, and in New York too. I guess you have it in New York now too.
Yes, New York now. New York even then accepted gay marriages performed out of state. It just didn't allow them to be performed in state. Now you can perform them in state.
So your marriage is kosher.
It is, exactly.
So to speak. Okay. What does it mean to you that you could actually marry him, as opposed to have whatever the other options were, common law, civil unions, I guess, whatever, you know the list.
Yeah. Well, I should start by saying that I think civil unions are already something. There are some people in the gay community who've said that they really are no good at all, and they're not no good at all. We had our civil partnership in England, and I was actually not that interested in doing it. I really wanted to have kids. John really wanted to get married. He said he'd have kids if I really wanted to. I said I'd get married if he really wanted to. So that was kind of how we got to it. And then I felt that process of standing up in front of all of the people we loved the most in the world and saying that we were going to spend the rest of our lives together felt so powerful and so compelling. And it was such an overwhelming revelation to me. I just suddenly thought, it's not that I didn't really love him as much a week before and then we got married and suddenly it was all perfect. It was just that I thought, oh, we're not looking anymore. We're not considering other possibilities. It's us now and going forward. So that was huge. Then when the word marriage came along and we had the second wedding in which we could use that word, there was something about having someone stand up in front of us and saying, I now pronounce you married, that made me feel as though, okay, what we have actually, it's as good as what my parents had, what my brother has, what so many of my other friends have. It felt like it was really the same thing. And it felt as though as we formed a family, our family would have the same rights and the same access and the same recognition as other people's families. And again, I was surprised by how much it meant to me. I thought we already did the civil partnership, our friends all know, and then it was marriage. And it felt exalted, and it felt, again, like it connected into this whole history. Presumably it's what my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents had done, and there I was doing it too.
I don't want to stereotype customs officers or border patrol and that kind of thing, but I am trying to imagine when you did it the first time in England, came back to America, had to present your passports, and you said, this is my what?
It was very uncomfortable. We looked at each other and said, it's one U.S. customs form per family. We're married. If we were a married couple under other circumstances, we'd be one family. We'd go on one customs form. But if we get a customs officer who doesn't like gay people, do we really want to get into this with the customs officer? At that point, we had no legal protections in the United States, and because of the Defense of Marriage Act, we were not considered a family. And it was very distressing to me to find us going through that, but what are we? But what aren't we? But who accepts it? But who doesn't accept it? That constantly having to measure. I mean, I have it at some level just in ordinary social experience. I meet people and I think, okay, if I say, my husband, da-da-da-da-da, are they going to be sort of taken aback, and do I want to deal with their being taken aback, and how will I deal with it politely, and so on. But at customs, I really thought, okay, until the laws acknowledge and accept us, we're going to be stuck in this awkward interstitial space, and it was very uncomfortable.
So what'd you do?
That time we went in separately, and since then we've decided that we are not going to do that, and we go in together, and we declare ourselves as a family, especially when we're traveling with our children.
Mm-hmm. And do you kind of kick yourself all these years later for doing it separately?
You know, I think it was what I had to do then. It seemed to make sense then. I praise myself and pat myself on the back for not doing it anymore.
You mentioned DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, and I just parenthetically want to go off the path here of our interview to ask you, just for your personal reflections on Bill Clinton, who signed that law, said he had to sign it or else he wouldn't have won his re-election bid because he feared what not signing it would mean, has I guess in subsequent years acknowledged it was a mistake. He didn't feel good about it. I guess he's sort of asked for forgiveness for it now, and obviously he has changed his view and is now pro same-sex marriage. What's your view of Bill Clinton today?
I'm a huge admirer of Bill Clinton. I did a little work on his first campaign. He very kindly wrote a blurb for this book when it came out. Hillary has, of course, made speeches as Secretary of State about gay rights, which have been absolutely groundbreaking, and has come out with her support for gay rights. I think it's unfortunate that he decided that we were the community that could be thrown under the bus to enable his election. I wish he hadn't done that, but I feel he's really done all he can to make up for it since. And I feel that even then, in his personal interactions, he was very respectful of gay people, and that it was a sort of realpolitik decision rather than something that came from any deep conviction of his.
Is that better or worse?
You know, I think it's understandable. I think he's someone who has deep convictions, but he was also a politician, and he continued in the political game. As I say, I feel like he's made up for it since then, and I feel like even at the time, what he said to people who were there to listen was, you haven't won in the court of public opinion yet, and you have to do some more of that before we can prevent laws from this coming through.
Understood.
And on to public opinion we went.
Yes, indeed. Okay, back on the path. Here's Andrew Sullivan, whom I'm sure you know, eh? You must know him.
I do, yes.
Yeah, writing in the Daily Beast back in July of 2011. When I thought of the distant future, of what I would do and be as a grown-up, there was a blank. I simply didn't know how I would live, where I would live, who I could live with. I knew one thing only. I couldn't be like my dad. For some reason, I knew somewhere deep down that I couldn't have a marriage like my parents. It's hard to convey what that feeling does to a child. In retrospect, it was a sharp, displacing wound to the psyche. At the very moment you become aware of sex and emotion, you simultaneously know that for you, there is no future coupling, no future family, no future home. In the future, I would be suddenly exiled from what I knew, my family, my friends, every household on television, every end to every romantic movie I'd ever seen. That's Andrew Sullivan writing, but I wonder if another Andrew could have written that as well.
I think I could have. There was very much that sense of not seeing a path. I sometimes think if I had been able to see just one day from my current life when I was 14 and know that that was where I was headed, all the rest of it would have been fine. But I had the same feeling that Andrew Sullivan had. I had the feeling that the only options were sad ones, that the only ways that things could work out were ways that were not as desirable as those of my heterosexual peers and family. And it was a loneliness. It felt so lonely. I sort of thought, I felt very alone in what I was going through and what I was thinking, but I also thought I will be alone. I'll be alone all my life. I'll never have that stability.
Do you think, based on your experience and the people you've interviewed and met over the years, that there are still, I can't remember how old he said he was here, but let's say a teenager, young gay teenagers who feel this way today?
Of course there are. There are lots of young gay teenagers
in spite
who feel
of everything.
that way. I feel like there is progress, but the progress is, in the first place, it's regional. There are large swaths of America where people don't support gay rights or gay marriage at all. And I think people are growing up often in small communities, and so what they experience is what it's like for them to be gay at their school or in their family, rather than what it's like for them to be gay in the United States of America. There's still a very, very long way to go.
We have a lesbian premier of Ontario right now. This is the biggest jurisdiction in Canada, and for the first time ever, we have a female premier and an out-of-the-closet lesbian who is premier of Ontario. And I've seen polling on this. And polling, because I raise all this by way of following up on what you just said. I'm going to infer that you meant in urban United States it's one thing, in rural it's a different. But I've seen the polling in this province, and there's not much of a difference actually between the acceptance of her and who she is in urban and rural. Not the same in the United States?
In the first place, I think Canada's made enormous progress. And in the second place, I think in the United States, it's not so much urban and rural. It's that in the American South and Southwest, for example, I think there's much less tolerance of gay people, even in large urban settings. In areas that are very heavily religious and in which the primary religion has anti-gay elements, there's less tolerance. But also, it's surprising how it varies from region to region. I mean, when I was working on my book, I interviewed someone who came from Helena, Montana, who was transgender and who was also gay. So he had been the quarterback on the high school football team, and she ended up as a lesbian in New York.
I remember this story. It's frightening.
Yeah. So and she received such a warm and accepting experience in Montana when she went back there. It's not very urban, it's not on the coast, it's not any of those things. People were able to accept who she was. But I've come across many stories, especially of teenagers who are living in, I don't want to name particular states because it sounds disparaging, but anyway, who are living in various rural backwaters or who are living in big urban centers that are very conservative and very Christian and who are filled with self-hatred on the basis of how the society treats them.
I think I remember one of them where they strung the dog up and disemboweled it and ran the family right out of town.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, here's another quote. New York Times from March of this year. Here's Adam Liptak covering the defense of marriage events in the Supreme Court. Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan asked him, Charles Cooper, the lawyer for the opponents of same-sex marriage, how letting gay couples marry harmed traditional marriages. How does this cause and effect work? Justice Kagan asked. Mr. Cooper responded that, quote, it will refocus the purpose of marriage and the definition of marriage away from the raising of children and to the emotional needs and desires of adult couples. The key to marriage, he said, is procreation. Your thoughts?
So I think his argument is flawed in two ways. In the first place, I don't think that the focus of heterosexual marriage is procreation. I know many straight people who are married and who never wanted to have children. I know many older straight people who've gotten married. When my father married my stepmother when he was in his 70s and she was in her 60s, I mean, how could one say that that was about procreation? And there wasn't anybody sort of saying, oh, well, then it's not a real marriage and we can't take that seriously. But more significantly, I think that actually gay marriage increasingly is focused on procreation. Okay, the two people don't procreate through their sexual congress, but they decide to have a family, they adopt a child, they have a child through surrogacy, they have children in all kinds of other ways. A lot of the gay couples I know are choosing to have families and are therefore very much focused on providing a stable, secure background for their children, an environment in which their children feel loved and in which they know that everything isn't going to change tomorrow. And so I think those very arguments about procreation are actually more applicable some of the time to gay couples than to straight ones.
Having said that, here again, a New York Times coverage of the same case. Here's Justice Kennedy saying he was uncertain about the consequences for society of allowing same-sex marriage. Quote, we have 5 years of information to weigh against 2,000 years of history or more, he said, referring to the long history of traditional marriage and the brief experience of allowing gay men and lesbians to marry in some states. Supreme Court Justice Samuel A. Alito Jr. echoed the thought and said the court should not move too fast. Quote, you want us to step in and render a decision based on an assessment of the effects of this institution, which is newer than cell phones or the internet, he said. Put yourself in that room. If Justice Alito or Justice Kennedy said that to you, what would you come back at them with?
I would say that we live in a world in which things are constantly changing and constantly evolving. And the idea that you can't actually acknowledge the importance of any form of progress until it's been around for a long time is ludicrous. I mean, he mentioned the internet and cell phones. What effect have the cell phones really had on the psychology of people who are now always reachable? What are the ways in which using the internet has actually been damaging to some people who use it inappropriately or who use it too much or who are too addicted? They're all big questions and they all have to be worked through, but you don't work them through by saying we're going to make the internet illegal and nobody is allowed to have cell phones. You work them through by allowing people to have the internet or cell phones or gay marriage. And then if you discover that there are flaws and problems, you address those flaws and problems.
I'm sure during the course of your work you have done your own research into the effects on children of being in a same-sex marriage, being the children of same-sex married partners. But I don't know if there have been any, there can't be very many long-range or longitudinal studies on this to talk about whether there are long-lasting ill effects of such a thing. Do you know the answer to that question?
There are studies arguing every conceivable point of view, and they tend to be structured by people who set off with an idea of what point of view they want to end up with. There is a great deal of evidence that shows that children in gay families do very well, that in fact, because they usually were much sought after and much wanted, they didn't happen sort of through one night of drunken passion, that the families are often more committed to them and that the kids do very well. If they're in a social context in which they get teased for having gay parents, then that can be a downside. A lot of the work that was done on this dealt with families in which there were children and then one or the other parent came out as gay when the children were there and left the heterosexual partnership that they'd been in and went off and had a very different kind of life. And the disruption of that was often traumatic to children. But I hope that's the kind of disruption that there isn't going to be so much of anymore. I hope people are actually planning to spend their lives with people they want to spend their lives with, and if they're having families, doing it responsibly within that context.
Let's, in our remaining couple of minutes here, talk a bit about the future. And I wonder whether you see a future in which society, whatever that means, will see same-sex marriages and heterosexual marriages through the same set of eyes.
I think it's interesting to look at the model of miscegenation. Until 1966, it was illegal in some states for a black person and a white person to get married. And now, I think in most places in the United States, the idea of thinking that isn't really a marriage or that should be illegal is not there. There are plenty of white people who don't want to marry black people and vice versa, but I don't think that people have that level of judgment about others. And I hope that that's where we're headed with gay marriage, that there will be a point at which people say, really? You weren't allowed to get married? Why not? In the same bewildered way that the biracial children of friends of mine say that in relation to their own parents' marriages.
You've watched this issue make its progress through the years. How many years away are we from what you've just described?
You know, the progress has been astonishingly fast. When I was 3 years old, Time magazine described homosexuality as a pernicious sickness, a pitiable flight from life. And now we have a president in support of gay marriage. How long will it take to get there? Maybe 20 years, maybe 50 years, maybe 10 years. I feel like it's all going faster and better than I could have hoped.
Faster and better. Well, we're not done with you yet, Mr. Solomon. We're going to ask you to come back tomorrow because we are interested in your views on the changing nature of the gay community's identity, or a gay person's identity. So we'll hope you'll come back again tomorrow, and we'll do it once more with feeling.
Look forward to it.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.